Hello, folks, and welcome to the Vertigo Tea Party and another tea time. Today, we're going to talk about Valve removing the game Hatred from Steam Greenlight. Now, if you're not familiar with Hatred, they released a trailer about a month or two ago. It's ultra violent. It's very like in your face, showing some like up close, gruesome executions of innocent people, like putting their guns in their mouths and blowing their heads off. Stuff like that. Very, very gruesome, and it caused a lot of controversy when it first came out. People wringing their hands over how violent it is, blah blah blah. So, and I'll put a link to the trailer, and I'll actually have a lot of links in the description below the video to various sources I use for this video, and I will at the very top have the original Hatred trailer, so you can check it out and make a decision for yourself. I'm not going to link it here because one, trailers tend to get content ID strikes, and two, some people might be offended by it. So, at any rate, that's what Hatred is. And there's been some other back and forth behind the scenes kind of drama, but we're not going to really bother going into that. I want to focus today on Valve removing it from Steam Greenlight. So it went up on Steam Greenlight. I don't think it was up for long. I don't know if it was even 24 hours. And Valve pulled it. They pulled it with the statement, based on what we've seen on Greenlight, we would not publish Hatred on Steam. As such, we're taking it down. Incredibly vague statement. Doesn't point out anything in particular. Just says, based on what we've seen on Greenlight, we wouldn't publish it. Okay, so let's get this stuff out of the way first. Valve owns Steam and everything related to it. They can do whatever they want. They're a private company. They can remove random games if they want. They can they can do whatever. They can take it all down tomorrow. Licensing stuff aside, they could, within reason, do whatever they want. They have no legal obligation to carry Hatred, right? So no one is arguing their legal obligation here. No sane person is arguing that they should be forced to carry it. I don't believe they should be forced to carry it. Again, it's within their legal right. But the people are getting confused on is just because it's legal to do something doesn't mean that it's a smart decision. It doesn't mean it's fair, and it doesn't mean it's good for your company, good for your platform. So that's what we want to discuss today is it a fair move? What does this mean for Steam Greenlight? What's the point of Steam Greenlight if you're just going to prejudge games before the people are allowed to vote on it in the first place? Now, the developers of Hatred, who's basically Destructive Creations is their name, and I'll post a picture of it here. But they posted this picture on their Facebook page showing their well, first their band page, but also the Steam Greenlight stats. What they were ranked. If you're not familiar with Greenlight, just very quickly, games get put on Greenlight. You can't buy them, but people vote on them. Just Steam people vote on them, and if it gets enough yes votes, it eventually will go on Steam. So it's that way. The idea is the community votes. The community decides what games appear on Steam. So these good indie games that don't have publishers, they can, get a fast track to Steam if a lot of people like it and thumbs it up. And the games that are bad, broken, look bad, whatever, they never get voted. They just sit in Greenlight for eternity. So at any rate, these are the posted stats for Hatred, with a incredibly impressive, from what I hear, 93% people voting yes, please put this on Steam. 7% voting no, do not put this on Steam. Now, full disclosure here, I talked to one indie developer, and again, one indie developer, and this indie developer actually supports Destructive Creations, the company making the game, but even this developer said that he thinks this is hogwash. He thinks that even the really good Greenlight games hover around 50, 55, maybe 60%. This person said that there was no way that it could conceivably have 93%, especially being as controversial as it is. Now, I'm going to make no statement on that because I don't look at Steam Greenlight charts. I'm not an indie developer. I don't know how all this works. So I just wanted to present that information. And again, I do want to point out that this developer is actually on their side. This is not somebody who doesn't like them, is just looking for a reason to throw the crap on. This is a person who actually backs them and flat out said that they were pretty sure that this was, at least the likes, were fake. But again, I'm presenting it because this is what they put on their Facebook page, and it's interesting nonetheless. Regardless, you can see from their information, a lot of people wanted it on there. It's ranked number 7 out of over 2,000 games. So obviously there was a lot of people wanting it on there. Again, assuming this information is accurate, and I have no way one way or the other to verify it being such. So a lot of people wanted it, and again, the point of Greenlight is for the community to decide themselves what games do we want. So why was this removed from Steam? Now people say, oh well, there's other games that have been removed from Steam. I heard people could say, well, War Z was removed. I didn't hear people complaining about that. Where was the complaints there? Completely different scenarios. I did some quick searching. Sorry about that. I did some quick searching for games that have been removed from Steam, excluding things that were removed because of publishers, like EA and Ubisoft removing games because they want you to buy it on their platforms. Ignoring all of that, I found a few prominent ones. Of course, the War Z was removed. It was removed because a lot of, if you don't remember, sketchy things are going on with War Z. Things like stolen art assets, things listed in the description of the game that weren't true, that just flat out were not in the game. A lot of it just doesn't work, wasn't working, broken, things like that. So there was a lot of questionable, sketchy stuff, not in the game itself, but how the developers were conducting themselves on Steam and the information they were presenting to customers. And I think that's a key point, which I'll hit on again, I'm sure, is the information they were presenting to potential customers was incorrect. Similar to Earth Year 2066, I wasn't as familiar with this one. I think I'd heard about it vaguely, but from the article I read, it was basically the same thing. Possible stolen art assets, saying that some things in the game were there when they weren't. A lot of the game not working for a lot of people who bought it, like at all. Like early access is early access, but the game should at least work and have more than the absolute bare bones. So that game was pulled, similar reasons. Lastly, there was the most recent Paranautical Activity was removed. Again, not because of the content in the game, but because one of the lead developers made a quote-unquote death threat to Gabe Newell, the head of Valve, over Twitter. So again, none of these removals had anything to do with the content of the game. It was all about either the way these games presented information or the developer's behavior off the developer. And if there's other games, and I don't know of a single game that's been removed because of the content of the game, because it was offensive, because it was over the line, anything like that, as far as I know. So all of those examples don't really hold any water. They're completely unrelated. And I think most people are okay with games that are saying they've got all these things that they don't have being removed is probably okay. Like you don't want them flat out lying that you've got all this stuff and you load it up and none of it's there. So I don't think a lot of people will have an issue with that. So again, as far as I know, this is the first game that was removed because of the content therein. So you have to ask yourself, well, why? What's so bad about Hatred? And if you haven't watched it, to really understand the context, I would strongly urge you to watch, like pause here, go watch the trailer. Because without watching the trailer, you won't really know the extent of the violence. And I will say flat out, like this stuff doesn't bother me at all. I just don't care because I realize I'm playing a game. I don't think, I don't blur the lines between game and reality. I understand I'm playing a game and I can enjoy doing most things in game that I would never ever do in real life. For multiple reasons, like one being morally wrong, things like that. But I do think it's important you watch it because I will say there's definitely some scenes that made me go, whoa, like that's hardcore. Like that's pretty intense. That doesn't mean I think the game shouldn't be played. That doesn't mean I think the developers are bad people. That means, wow, that's really intense. Like that's really intense. I can see why some people, this might be over the line for them. I could see why they wouldn't want to play a game like this or watch a game like this. And that's fine. There's people who don't want to see or play games like Grand Theft Auto or Hotline Miami because they're overly violent. That's okay. That doesn't mean those games shouldn't exist. So yeah, you look at the trailer, and I guess Valve looked at the trailer after they put it on Greenlight, which makes you wonder, how did it get past the process in the first place? But regardless, why? Like, what is too far? You look at all these other highly offensive games that are on Steam. You've got Manhunt, a game where you brutally murder people and you get bonus points the more brutally you murder. Like, well, I don't think you get points, but basically it's rewarded to you that you get to see more brutal fatalities, right? If you've never played it, basically you sneak up on people and brutally murder them. And the longer you can stay behind them, you have to hold a button to like build up your brutality meter. And the higher you get it, the more like insanely brutal the murder is. So you're actually rewarded with a more visual payoff of how brutal the murder is. I played through about half the game. It was okay. I thought it was funny to do the brutal murders. Again, doesn't make me a murderer. Doesn't mean I'll ever go do that. I enjoyed it for what it was. Just like I would never assume people who watch a human centipede would actually trap a bunch of people in their basement and tie their butts to their mouths. Same thing here. But you have GTA 5, or not GTA 5 yet. I'm not from the future. But you have Grand Theft Auto, is out there. It's probably going to be on Steam. The other Grand Theft Autos are. I wouldn't see why that one's not going to be. Postal, the obvious the obvious comparison to Postal, where again you just run around and a lot of times randomly murdering tons of people. Mortal Kombat's a great example, because remember when Mortal Kombat came out, those of you who are old enough to remember, the news went crazy about Mortal Kombat. You can rip this guy's head off and his spine's still connected. You can catch this woman on fire and it just leaves her bones. This is awful. This is going to teach children to kill. This is going to make kids not care about killing. They're going to become killers. What happened? None of that shit happened. But it obviously that's just gotten more and more brutal as time has gone on. Hotline Miami, incredibly brutal game. Does it get a pass because it's pixelated? So if Hatred was pixelated, would it be okay if I was running around shooting pixelated people in the face and little square blood droplets were shooting everywhere, little square pieces of brain were hitting the wall? Would that be okay? Hotline Miami's incredibly brutal. You grab people, you hit them with bats, and slam their face on the ground over and over until they're dead and blood shoots everywhere. Incredibly brutal game. Why is that allowed to be on Steam? But yet somehow Hatred crosses the line. So where's the line? The point is Valve needs to make a statement and say, look, this is the line that we're not going to cross. And that's that. Like, because, look at the other side. Let's look at the other side for a minute. Does there have to be a line at all? I would say it's probably not a bad idea to have a line of some kind. Omitting stuff that's not game related, again, fraudulent companies, things of that nature, games that don't work, stuff like that. Ignoring all of that, do we want to see games like, I don't know, like, and not to offend anyone, but like a game where all you do is sexually assault people, like graphically sexually assault people? Should that be allowed on Steam if it gets greenlit? If we put that kind of game on Greenlight and it gets enough votes, should we go, oh, well, the community wanted it, let's put it up there? See, I mean, and that's where you run into, and that's where it's hard not to be hypocritical, because, you have to figure it out, because I wouldn't want a game like that on there. I wouldn't play something like that. And I think something like that is pretty like insane over the top. Now, but if you break it down and turn my own arguments against me, do I think that would turn someone into a sexual assaulter or a rapist or what have you? No, I don't. Because no study, and we'll talk about the studies later, but nothing indicates that that's the case, right? Nothing indicates that if you do that in a game, you're going to go do that in real life or think it's okay to do that in real life. So it gets by on that. But I have my own lines that I don't want to cross. But at the same time, I need to be able to say, just because I don't like it, just because I find it morally vile, to steal a word that's completely overused these days, I find it morally vile. Does that mean other people shouldn't have access to it on Steam, the world's largest PC platform? And I want to cover that in just a bit too. So I think there's absolutely an argument to be made, especially since Valve is the company that runs Steam. This isn't just some publicly moderated or government ran thing. It's a private company. So I can totally understand wanting to draw lines, because they don't want the media being like, you can buy this terrible sexual assault simulator on Steam by Valve, right? That doesn't sound good. So there's a few reasons for lines to be drawn, but I think it's important that they stop being cryptic and they are upfront about what those lines are, and why these old games get a pass. Are they just grandfathered in? What about GTA 5? Should GTA 5 not be allowed because now you're not allowing games that allow like horrible violence against civilians, like say GTA 5 does? Are you just going to not allow those types of games anymore? Or are you just pandering because Hatred got a lot of negative press and now you don't want to deal with public backlash? So you're just going to kind of block it because you don't want to have to deal with it. Ironically, you're still having to deal with it because you blocked it, but you see what I'm saying. So they really need to draw a line where it is. And again, I'm not against having lines. Again, they're a private company. They can do whatever the hell they want. But if they truly want Steam Greenlight to be the people's platform to let the community choose, if a game goes on there and unless it's snuck by there and it's got by their previously stated lines, it should stay there. If the community wants it, it should be allowed to be on Steam. And it needs to be said, Steam is super important. People are like, well, who cares? They just won't be on Steam, right? People who want to get it can still get it. While this is true, you need to understand that it's huge. Being on Steam for indies is huge money wise, basically. There is numerous blogs and posts by various indie devs who have stated the gigantic difference in how much money they made before Steam and after Steam, especially during Steam holiday sales. Lots of those out there. So it makes a huge difference to the financial viability of a product and whether or not the studio can either keep working on games full time or even keep making games at all. Now, I'm not saying that Steam has a moral obligation, or a Valve has a moral obligation to keep these games on Steam because, well, you're the biggest. You sell 90% of the PC games. That's just a number totally made up off the top of my head, by the way. So now you have responsibility to hold that. I'm not saying that. And I really hate when people assign responsibility to people or corporations saying, well, you're in this position, so therefore you automatically have to do this because I say so. I don't think they have the responsibility, but it does need to be understood. This is not just oh darn, we don't get on Steam. This is well, our game is probably not going to make very much money now. We might not even be able to recoup costs because it's not on Steam. That's again, a big deal. Now, obviously, this game is going to get a lot of press because of this. It's getting a lot of press because of the trailer. Now it's getting a lot of press because it's being removed from Steam. So is the difference between the extra press they're getting for being pulled from Steam and the trailer and all that going to make up for the sales that they would have made on Steam? Almost certainly not. That's not going to happen. I really don't think so. So it's going to hurt them regardless. No matter how much press they get, it's still going to hurt them in the long run. And again, not arguing that they have a responsibility to carry it, but it's important to know that this is a huge blow to the development house. So I brought up GTA a few times, GTA 5 specifically. Now, to be fair, I haven't played GTA 5 yet because it's on PC. Wake me up when it is. But I've read a lot of people who have played it, and I've read multiple times about some of the scenes. Like there's a horrific torture scene that you have to do. And I've played other GTAs. I know how it works. There's tons of innocent people to kill, and a lot of times you kill them just because, or they're in the way, or it's fun to just vent because you've had a long day at work, and you enter the cheat codes and put God mode in and get all the weapons and just start mowing down police officers and civilians, just doing horrible things to them. So why is that okay? Why is that okay? But hatred is suddenly bad. I've read an article or two about the hair splitting of, well, you see, in GTA, it's not the goal. You can do that. You can kill people, but it's a means to an end. So it doesn't really matter. You don't have to kill them. But then in this game, that's the whole goal. That's the reward system. That's complete nonsense. First of all, the vast majority of people, damn good and well, don't give a shit about the overarching narrative. And that's just GTA really a commentary on America's fascination with violence and our desensitization. Most people don't give two shits about that. What they want to do is they want to hop in, they want to steal cars, they want to run people down, they want to shoot people, get in gunfights, do fun things in a sandbox world. They don't give two shits about all that. So I don't buy that comment about or any of the arguments about, well, it's the emphasis that the developers had. First of all, it doesn't work. It doesn't apply to most gamers. Most people don't give two shits. I think you'd have a hard time arguing against that. Even if you did, who gets to be the judge now? Who gets to say that Hatred is just doing it because of sadistic fun and because they're secretly wanting to be killers in real life, but they don't have the balls, so they make this game and they really don't care. They don't have any empathy and they really want to murder people. Like, who's to say that, okay, well, maybe they're making a comment, maybe they're saying something. Who gets to make that final judgment call? Who gets to decide? So now you're trying to put yourself or others in the position to say, well, I say that your art, and remember, you want to argue how games are art all the goddamn time. You're wanting to put your interpretation of their artwork as the definitive. This is what they meant. This is what they meant to do. That's not okay. This shouldn't be allowed. So again, who's going to sit there and say, well, GTA, it's okay if we allow GTA on because, again, it's, satirical commentary on American life or whatever nonsense you want to use. It just does not fly at all because there's got to be somebody who decides that. And most gamers probably, again, don't really care anyway. They're just having fun running people over and watching them fly on their hood and slamming them against the wall. Sims is the same way. Look at the Sims, like the most docile game ever. How many people do you know that one of the first things they do is kill somebody in a pool or make them fix a stove until they die and then laugh as they die? Like, why is that okay? Like, there's that's not people are a lot of times are doing it just because. Like, sometimes they're doing it for the money, which is why I usually do it. Or they're just doing it because they think it's funny. They think it's funny to watch somebody drown to death in a pool or get shocked to death by an oven. Are those people sick? Are those people sadists? Do those people lack empathy? Like, it's just such a ridiculous double standard to say, if you're doing it this way and you like this, then you're a closet psychopath. You have no empathy. You're truly sick. You really want to do these things to people. Versus, well, it's presented differently, so you don't want to do these things. That's what. And here's the other thing that completely kills me about all this shit. We've had this conversation so many times before, not just with games. Back, when D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, was super popular, like in the 80s, you had all these people claiming it was like a doorway into Satanism and cultism, and people really thought they would become wizards and would start, trying to open gateways and worship the devil and all that bullshit. I remember telling my grandmother that I played Dungeons and Dragons. She's like, oh, no, you got to be careful with that stuff. Anybody who's played Dungeons and Dragons knows it's 50% rolling dice, 50% talking about bullshit, and eating chips and drinking terrible drinks and getting fatter by the second. We've had the same issue with music when people were blaming rap and Marilyn Manson for all these school shootings. It's this Manson guy. They listen to Manson music. They listen to rap. That's, we found these CDs in their rooms. This is why these people are doing these terrible things. We need to ban this music. We need to heavily censor this music and put a whole bunch of labels on it to keep these kids from doing these terrible, terrible things. Then we had video games as the scapegoat. We got, these conservatives, you got these Jack Thompsons out there who are saying, oh, these GTA, these murder simulators, Grand Theft Auto, it's teaching people how to steal cars and that killing's okay and teaching you how to shoot guns and to kill people like these Call of Duty games. I don't know if Call of Duty was out then, but regardless, it's teaching these people how to kill people. And now we're doing it again. We're having this conversation again. But the absolute most bullshit thing about all of this is when video games were coming up, we pointed them to study after study after study that showed no link between violence and playing video games. Multiple studies to discredit all the bullshit they were saying about teaches you to kill, makes you violent, makes you think it's okay to go hurt and kill and maim other people. But now it's us. It's our journalists. It's some of our gamers doing the same thing, bringing up the same tired, completely discredited ideas about why now it's not okay because I don't like this. I think this is too far. Therefore, I'm not okay with this. Therefore, it should not be there. It shouldn't be made available. And there's people trying to skirt around it. They don't want to flat out say, "Oh, this game shouldn't exist." We don't want to censor. That's what kills me about this. Is people are like, "Well, we don't want to censor these games. We just want to, not have this content that we don't like in it. And if you have this content we don't like, we're okay with your game not being available to people." Which it's you kind of want censorship at that point. When you're saying I don't want these games that have these contents that I don't like in it available to people, that's pretty much a fancy roundabout way of saying you're okay with censorship. And I'm not. I'm all about adults making informed decisions about the products that they buy. Make no mistake, I don't really have a dog in this race. I think the game looks amusing. I would play it when it comes. Oh, I'm definitely going to play it now when it comes out because the hype, the anti-hype, or whatever you want to call it, people getting outraged because there's got to be something new to be outraged every day about, right? But I'm definitely going to play it now. I have no doubts that this game could be total garbage. It doesn't even really look. To be honest, it doesn't look that fun. It mostly just looks like a top-down, running around, just shooting random people. It looks pretty generic. Like if you replace the people with zombies or Nazis or robots or whatever, it looks like a pretty generic game with some pretty brutal executions. Which, by the way, it's hilarious that people got upset about the executions. Not a single person complains about the brutal executions in something like Shadows of Mordor. But it's okay because they're orcs, right? And yeah, they've got 2 legs, 2 arms, 5 fingers, 5 fingers, 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 ears. They're very human-like, barring, the sharp teeth and the green. But totally not to be confused. Sorry, I keep hitting the mic today. It's okay to decapitate them. It's okay to jump over them and stab them in the back of the head with a sword in slow motion and then take a picture of it and then show all my friends, yeah, look at this horrible execution I did on this orc. But it's okay because it's not a human. As long as it's not a human, it's all right. It's okay to murder these people brutally. Or as long as they're not under the guise of, oh, these people are evil. They're not civilians. I think that's what kills people too. No pun intended. Is that you're in this game? It looks like you're mostly doing this to civilians. You're doing it to like cops who are your enemies and whatnot. Which again, you kill loads of cops in GTA. But I think that's what another thing that drives people nuts is you're killing innocent people. If you were like going through a gang hideout or an evil Nazi stronghold, I don't think people would whine as much about it. But because you're killing innocent people, then people are upset. And again, I can totally understand that's the line for some people, and that's fine. But when you say this game shouldn't exist because it crosses my line, that I have a problem with that. I have a problem with that because I have my own line, but I don't say, this is my line, you've crossed it, now you shouldn't have this game. So that's where I have a problem. Anyway, kind of going back to what I was talking about before about having this conversation. We've done this 100 times, saying all this different media, all these different games cause people to do these terrible things. It's been debunked over and over and over again. We ourselves as gamers have said, used the studies and defended ourselves from people like Jack Thompson saying, no, this stuff is bullshit. But now here we are. Like Jack Thompson would be rolling around in his grave if he heard this and also if he was dead. Like he didn't have to do anything. Just let us do it to ourselves because now our own media outlets and our own people are saying this game shouldn't exist because you do these terrible things. And if you play this, well, that means that you are a sociopath and you're just like one step away from killing people. And yes, I have actually seen articles with statements like that in the article, hinting or flat out saying, if you play this game, if you enjoy this, you have no empathy for other people, and you are totally okay with going outside of your house right now, putting a shotgun to some woman's face and pulling the trigger. I'm sorry, I might enjoy that in the game. I wouldn't do that. Like I would not do that. I would not enjoy that. And fuck you for saying I would. Fuck off for saying that based on zero evidence, motherfucker. Based on zero evidence, people make these statements with authority. They say that shit with authority. If you play this, you would go kill somebody. Fuck off. Like, there's no evidence whatsoever backing your claim. You're just making this shit up because it's too far for you. So therefore, you're going to backstep and go, well, this is too far. I remember, but you think about this. Think about if you have non-gaming parents or grandparents or what have you, that think about what they would say if they watched you play something like Shadows of Mordor or Dead Rising 3 or GTA or Manhunt or something like that. They would think a lot of times they're going to think, "Oh wow, you can do this horrible things in games? You must be sick." Well, maybe your parents wouldn't say that, but if a random stranger saw you playing games like that, they would, "Oh man, this person must be sick to enjoy this. What kind of sick people are these that play these games?" How many times you've heard that kind of shit? When you're playing a game that has a lot of violence, you're like, "Ha ha ha, I'm running these people over and I'm shooting them in Grand Theft Auto and I'm smashing them against my hood of my car and watching them fly," and you laughing your ass off. And then, Joe and Jane Schmo walk by seeing you play that and they think you must be sick to kill people like that and find enjoyment of it. And then they watch, and of course, and then they go home and watch Human Centipede on Netflix and find absolutely no problem with that. And I have an even story about that. I was playing like many years ago. I was playing Metal Gear Solid 4, and for some reason, I was showing my mom that game, just trying to show her how realistic the graphics were, at the time, or how good the graphics were at the time. And like I like zoomed in on a person's face with a rifle or something, and showing her how real it looked. And just as a surprise, I shot the person and killed him in the head. And she's like, "Oh my gosh!" She's like, it's so realistic." She's like, "It looks so." She's like, "There's no wonder people keep shooting up schools and stuff. Like these games are like basically the idea was because these games are so realistic and you can just shoot people. Well, this must be why. This must push people to do these terrible things." So from her perspective, she'd argue the same thing, except her line was way further up. If I was just killing, 16-bit pixels on a screen, she wouldn't. Most people probably wouldn't even think anything of it. But because it looks realistic, that's her line. And now anything beyond that line means if you play that, well, there's no reason or no point. There's no surprise that people are sick now and you're doing these things. And we know that's not true. And I remember being so I wasn't angry with her. I was disappointed about how she said that. I kind of lectured my own mother. I was like, "Look, I mean, you can't tell me just because I understand that this is fantasy. I'm enjoying it. I find the humor in this, but I understand it's fantasy. Just like you can sit here and watch a horror flick, a slasher flick, and watch these teenagers get killed in these funny or gruesome ways and like cringe or laugh or like, 'Oh, what an idiot. Oh, you're dead now, moron.'" Like same exact thing. But again, it's this. I hate seeing what should be people arguing for us are saying, if you cross this line, we've moved the line, right? It's okay. We've moved the line back further, but now it's too far. Now my arbitrary line is where I've decided it's too far. And that kind of shit bugs me. And especially when people make these absolutely baseless claims based on their arbitrary line to try to justify saying that this kind of game isn't okay. And I've seen several developers and various journalists try to make that differentiation when it's not there. It absolutely doesn't exist. Playing one type of this game versus another doesn't mean that suddenly you are the type of person to do these terrible things. And depending on who you ask, that line is going to be somewhere different. If you ask Jack Thompson, if he even cares anymore, it's going to be if you play like GTA or Call of Duty at all, you're the type of person who would kill someone. And we all know that's bunk. The last thing I want to hit on is people who are just dismissing it. Not a big deal. Glad that it's been removed. It looked like crap anyway. I don't have a horse in the race. Who cares if it gets removed? That kind of attitude. Or even worse, well, it looks like it was going to be a crappy game anyway, so who really cares, right? Who cares? That's the problem. My interest in the game honestly has very, very little to do with my stance on its removal. As I've said, I think it looks like it's probably going to be a pretty mediocre game. Again, replace the humans with robots, and nobody would bat an eye that you open a shotgun up to a robot's head and blow its little nuts and bolts across the wall with oil spraying everywhere. Nobody's really going to care. That was some jazz hands there. But so I don't really have a horse in the race. I think it'll be maybe interesting. I'll probably play it, but I don't expect much. My expectations are low. But again, my interest in the game itself doesn't affect my attitude on arbitrarily removing games with incredibly vague responses and excuses on why you've done so. Even assuming or removing the Valve's a private company that can do whatever they want. But if they want their Greenlight platform to be what they say it is, they need to have some consistency and not be nannying over it and removing games that offends their delicate sensibilities. Think of it this way. How many people would have lost their minds if, say, Hotline Miami was pulled? What if a week after being released or, preloaded, or not preloaded, but for pre-sale, Steam said, you know what? This game is over the line. Let's yank this game. Let's yank it. How many people would, or if they did it now, I mean, it's a little late now, or if they said Hotline Miami 2, you're not coming to Steam because you're too violent. We're not going to allow it. People would be outraged. These same people who don't care suddenly are going to care, and they're going to come up with, of course, the excuses as to why Hotline Miami violence is okay, because it's pixelated, because the violence is there to accent how completely out of control this is. Whatever, again, bullshit excuses they want to use to say that it's different. People will be flipping their shit. What if it turns out Gabe Newell was a huge Christian, like hardcore Christian, and before Gone Home hit Steam, he said, nope, this game pushes a gay agenda, as the Christians like to use. It's pushing a gay agenda, and I'm afraid it's going to push kids to homosexuality, and so we're going to remove Gone Home. No Gone Home for anybody. I would be as adamantly against that as I would be against removing Hotline Miami or removing Hatred or removing Roguelike number 5632. I like to think that I'm going to kind of ignore whatever the content of a specific instance is and look at it in the greater picture. In this case, Valve censoring what they put on Greenlight and kind of backtracking on what they say Greenlight is for, which it's supposed to be us, the community, deciding what gets put on there. And again, to be perfectly clear before somebody misunderstands, I definitely don't think Gabe's a Christian, nor do I think Gone Home pushes a gay agenda. And I think all of that is total, utter horseshit. But the point was, if they were arbitrarily removing games like that because of religious beliefs, moral beliefs, social, political, whatever beliefs, if they just started removing games, people would be pissed off. And it's a lot of the people who haven't taken a don't care attitude about this whole hatred thing would be right at the front lines saying how terrible Valve is and we need to boycott Steam and let's all move to Desora, and because boycotts work really, really well on the internet. These people will be outraged, and it's disappointing to see people say, well, the game looks kind of crappy and it's past my line, so I'm not okay. I'm okay with it being removed. These people won't be okay when a game they like is removed because it passed whatever arbitrary line Steam has. So I guess the long and short, to kind of summarize, I think it's ridiculous they removed the game. I think that especially after allowing it on the Greenlight in the first place, and I think they really need to get their shit in gear for Greenlight. They've said repeatedly that, or at least Gabe has, that Greenlight is definitely not what they intended it to be. They need to stop saying that and actually start doing something about it. They've been saying that for over a year now. They need to shit or get off the pot and make some guidelines. Now, if they come from this and say, okay, here's some guidelines about what we are and weren't going to allow, then all right, fine. I still think it's a stupid decision, but whatever, they're going to do whatever they're going to do. And Valve doesn't seem to be quick to change stuff or be more open with communication. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear anything else about this and the next game will just be pulled randomly because reasons, and they'll give some vague excuse like they did this time. But I will say I'm just very disappointed. Again, it kind of circumvents the entire point of Greenlight. And there's been games that are, just as violent as this that are allowed to stay on. And there will be continued to be more games. Do you think Steam, if given the chance to carry Grand Theft Auto 5, is not going to carry it? There's no chance. There's way too much money lost. There's no way they're not going to carry it. It doesn't matter how brutal the game is. even if there was like a mode, they added a mode just for PC to kind of simulate hatred, like where you just walk around and brutally murdering innocent people, which you do anyway in Grand Theft Auto, then they would still allow it and they wouldn't say a word about it. They would just kind of let it go under the radar. One last thing here, and I just want to point this out. I find it funny that people point out in GTA that it's okay that you can kill innocents because that's not the reward of the game. That's not the goal. It's kind of in the way. Versus, and I kind of talked about this before, that hatred, like that's the point, is to kill people, including a lot of innocent civilians and police and whatnot. And even though Grand Theft Auto has several quests where you have to kill police, regardless, or you're very strongly urged to kill the police. But another thing that struck me is, doesn't that make it worse? Doesn't that make GTA worse? If I don't have to kill innocent people, but then I choose to do so, just because it's fun, isn't that more fucked up? I don't have to kill this person, but I'm going to anyway. What if you had an RPG, or what about these several of these choice-based RPGs, right? These morality-based RPGs where you can choose to either help this person or kill them and take the loot. How many people were outraged because you killed the NPC instead of doing their quest? Like, isn't that worse? Because you didn't have to kill them, you could have helped them, but you chose to murder them for, because you thought it was funny, but because of the reward. Same thing with GTA. If you don't have to kill these innocent people, then what justification do you have on going on a rampage and mass murdering people and saying, "Oh, that's okay, I wouldn't really do this in real life." But then wringing your hands because hatred has the same thing. Anyway, that's been long enough. Thank you guys for watching. As always, leave your comments in the comment description below, as I will put links to the hatred trailer and other sources that I use for various things, so you can kind of read up on that kind of stuff yourself. As always, also follow me on Twitter if you'd like, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.